Date with a Debut is recorded and produced on a Wappigal country, and I pay my respects to all elders past and present and extend that to any First Nations people tuning in. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. On with the show. Welcome to Date with a Debut, a podcast about debut authors, their incredible books, and their journey to publication. If you're looking for a new author to discover or writing inspiration for your own story and you don't know where to start, this is the place to be. I'm Nick Wasiliev, host of the show, and I'm delighted to welcome another debut author in today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, jump online and give us a thumbs up, a 5-star review. It really helps the show out. If you also want to hear episodes when they drop, be sure to subscribe to Words and Nerds, or you can subscribe to Date with a Debut on Podbean to hear the latest episodes as they drop. Want to support the show more? You can also subscribe to my Patreon in the description to get early access to episodes, book reviews, recommendations, and a whole lot more. Wherever you are listening, thank you for listening to us and supporting the Australian book industry. You can also find any books mentioned in today's podcast down in the description. Today, I'm joined by Jessica Mansour-Nahra, a former communications consultant and writer from Brisbane. She's now travelled to London and Sydney before tree changing to a hamlet in Wiradjuri country, where she lives with her husband. Jessica holds a degree in history and law from the University of Queensland, but we're here to talk about her debut thriller novel, The Farm, published by Hachette Australia, which you can get a copy of right now down in the description. We will discuss some mild spoilers, so I recommend you grab a copy now, or at least very soon. Lastly, I will say this book contains intense themes and subject matter, as well as topics of depression, domestic violence, and miscarriages. If these affect you, there are many resources available to help you, including Lifeline on 13 11 14 or Beyond Blue on 1300 224 636. Reader and listener discretion is advised. I started off by asking Jessica about her own transition into writing and the essence of what makes a good thriller. This episode was recorded on Gundungurra country. Jessica, welcome to Date with a Debut.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a real privilege to have you here, talk about this amazing book, The Farm, which we'll get into a little bit. But before we begin, I must admit I got sidetracked. I always get sidetracked whenever I'm talking to authors because you then read up on all of the stuff and the history and stuff that you've been up to, and authors are really interesting people. And I wanted to first of all start off by asking about your life. You were in communications, you lived in London, you travelled the world, and then suddenly you decide to have a tree change in Wiradjuri country. Like, out of curiosity, as the risk of hitting with a general softball opener, bit of a left turn. Where did books sit in your life to the point where you're like, you know what, I want to try that. I want to try and write something.
Oh, goodness. Books have been in my life since I was a toddler, really. I learned to read with those books on tape when I was really little. I used to hide behind, we had this green velvet chair in the living room, and I had two older brothers. It was all very rough and tumble. So I would escape them, grab a little book and a tape and put it in the tape recorder and read fairy stories and, you know, the Princess and the Pea behind the green velvet chair where no one could find me. And I just thought that was magical. So I mean, I really remember saying to my mum, is this true? And she's like, no, they've made it up. And I was like, you can make this stuff up? So I thought, oh, I'd like to do that. So books have always been a really big deal to me. They're my number one hobby. I love to read. I love to write. And I actually went to university and did a law degree, which was so miserable. For me, there's amazing lawyers out there that love the law, and I thank God they exist, but that was not me. And so I'd say to my parents, I'm going to quit this semester. I'm dropping out. I'm going to be a university dropout. And they'd say, no, you're not. And I'd say, okay, no, I'm not. And then I remember you're meant to apply for legal roles in your final year of uni at the beginning of the year. And I just let that deadline wash over me, didn't mention it to anyone. I was very passive aggressive. And at the end of the year, my parents were like, all right, well, you've got to get a job now because you're graduating. And I was like, oh yeah, I'd better get a job. So I just applied for a job in admin at my law school, and I figured they have to take me because I'm one of their legal students. And they did. And it was while I was there that they tailored the role into a communications role for me. And so from then I realized, okay, I can create all of this different kind of content as a career, and it's very similar to writing. And maybe that will work for me while I figure out my life and write a novel on the side. I was always writing novels on the side. My first novel was terrible. It was about a breakup when I was 21. And that was dreadful. I don't think I ever finished it, thankfully. And then, yes, as I moved around and traveled and different things, I was always coming up with novel ideas and holding on to them. And I actually wrote a novel before The Farm, which was set back in time, a historical mystery on the South Coast, to do with the whaling family. So that was 7 years of research. Not wasted, even though it didn't get published. But yeah, I was always writing a book, and I was proud to have a career, you know, as a woman. Like, my parents invested in my education, and I was always raised to be really independent. And I had a fantastic career, which I really enjoyed. But writing novels was always where I wanted my life to go.
Well, it definitely has arrived at that particular point, and I also do love that you know, you kind of don't view those previous books and attempts as, you know, something that are waste or any sort of waste of time, because there's a great response that I had when I was chatting with Lisa Kenway, and she said, I'm glad that I wrote a whole bunch of books that didn't get published, because it meant that the next book I published was better, which I think is so true.
Oh, it's exactly the case. And I often think too, I'm glad I'm a little bit older when my first book was published. There's certainly a lot of life experience, I think, that betters your novel, betters your writing ability, the way that you, I think, can make sense of things and contextualize things. And that's not to say young writers aren't amazing, because we have amazing young writers, particularly in Australia too. But my first novels were all about making the mistakes that you don't want in your published novel and learning. And I mean, learning is something you should do lifelong, in my opinion, and stay curious and make those mistakes as you keep going. I'm really proud of The Farm, but I want my future books to be even better or be even more challenging. So it's never wasted. No time learning is ever wasted.
I agree. And I must say, when looking at The Farm, this is me just with my kind of craft question. This is the author in me coming out a little bit. You know, I've seen people make a lot of comparisons with The Farm to other great writers out there. I mean, you know, people have talked about the mystery, the thriller element, the stuff that, you know, Jane Harper does really, really well. But I must admit, when I was looking at that and seeing those comparisons, I was like, what I liked about The Farm is it's direct and it's effective, and it is seemingly simple in its writing approach, but there is extreme power and simplicity when you weave a great story and tapestry behind it that really means that simplistic or simple direct approach lends a lot more weight, and I love that in psychological thrillers. The subject matter of this book, which we will dive into, we'll try and be as spoiler free as we can, because you know, we don't want to spoil this book for listeners. But the subject matter in this in this time can sometimes veer towards just visceral, brutal subjects. Talk to me about what, now that you have had, you know, you've written a few books, you've got to this debut. What makes a good thriller? Because some moments, you know, I just want to know, because it was just, I love the craft of this book that you did here.
Thank you. I think what makes a good thriller, and for me personally, and I do love mysteries and thrillers, I absolutely do. I think there's a few elements that are really critical, and one is the main character that you identify with closely and quickly, and that you are really on their side, so that when things are happening to them that maybe they think are not good, you're worried alongside them. I think that's number one. It always comes back to character. But secondly, you need to be able to create a sense of foreboding and dread to build that tension. And while there may be relieving moments, and certainly in the book, I think my main character Layla has some beautiful moments with the gorgeous dog Rusty to give a bit of levity to what's going on. I know, Rusty. There's certainly a sense that you need your main character feel like they're in peril, even if they don't understand why. And you as the reader are not entirely sure why. And so keeping your main character in this state of sort of discombobulated confusion helps. Now, when I say confusion, I don't mean the reader should be confused, though. They need to know where they are and be along that journey. But when your character is feeling the subtext of things that are affecting them, I want the reader to feel that too. And I think that's where a good thriller has its genesis.
Out of curiosity, we're recording this right at the end of August. The book has been out for 3 days.
Yes.
It's been out for 3 days. How does it feel? How's the reaction been to a story like this?
Well, I mean, as you say, it's only been 3 days, but it's been just so exciting. I have loved every second of it. And often writers will say your publication day is really boring. Like mine was on a Tuesday, nothing special about a Tuesday, but writers will say, you've waited years and years and then sort of it's out, but nothing really happens. So my husband and I were like, well, we're just going to make something happen because this is really exciting. So we booked luncheon, we booked dinner and had a cocktail. I went to there's 3 places where you can buy books in my town. There's our beautiful independent bookshop, Books Plus. So I went there and signed books and gave them bookmarks and took photos. And then I went to Kmart and Big W to make sure they were on the shelf. And while I was there, I just sold them to people in browsing the shelves. I was like, would you like to buy my book? And Bathurst is such a sweet town that everyone said yes. So it was great. And look, on Instagram, you have a lot of supportive other authors that are all there to sort of cheer you on your debut and your publication day. And seeing readers generate content and mood boards about what they're visualizing for the landscape and the characters, being able to see that on Instagram is amazing. I mean, people's imaginations are incredible. So I'm just, in the happiest bubble ever at the moment.
It makes you realize how, at times when you're writing that first draft and you're squeezing it out and it's a nightmare, it does feel like you're on your own. But then all of a sudden it goes out and has a life of its own, and it's like, no, okay, it's this thing. I made a piece of art at the risk of sounding pretentious. I made something that people are reacting to and moving them, which is pretty cool.
And you dream of it, but you don't really think it's going to happen when you're doing that first draft.
Well, without further ado, let's talk about this book. Let's talk about it. This is the part of the show where I get the author to do the classic 1-minute pitch. And in classic fashion, on Date with a Debut, I now ask that question of you. I have hopped into a lift. You are there. Actually, you know what? Let's change it. I am in Kmart. I'm in Kmart. I'm a complete stranger, or actually, I'm in Books Plus. I'm a complete stranger on the in a bookshop, and you come up to me and you want me to buy your book. What is The Farm about?
Well, The Farm is an Australian Gothic psychological suspense novel. So if you liked Wuthering Heights, if you liked Rebecca or Gone Girl, you will really enjoy The Farm. It concerns our main character, Layla, an independent woman from Sydney in her late 30s, and she unfortunately suffers a health tragedy which knocks her for 6. So her supportive partner, James, says, hey, my family's got a farm 3 hours outside of Sydney. Why don't we take a year off? We'll go out there and rest and recover. Now, unfortunately, when Layla arrives at the farm, she's finding it a little more difficult to adjust than she expected. James is away a lot at work and she's finding it very isolating, and it feels quite stark, a little bit haunted feeling. And before long, she starts to experience some unusual and potentially supernatural phenomena. So Layla has to find out, is it something to do with her, and is her sense of reality breaking? Is it maybe something to do with the relationship she's in? Or is there something sinister about the history of the house itself? So that is The Farm. It's a lot about women's autonomy and our bodies, and what it might look like if you're feeling unsafe, and what do you do about that? So if you like the sound of that, you'll enjoy The Farm.
Well, I'm buying it. Good pitch. Nailed it. Ding. We've arrived at the farm level, which is good. And I first of all want to start by adding in, you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier when I was asking you about what makes a good thriller, but the thing that really grabbed me from the get-go is the feeling of dread in this story. I want to give you flowers on that, particularly and I want to say this, I grew up on a farm. I lived at a farm. I'm recording at my family property right now. And the one thing that I want to, highlight that you nailed is your use of setting and your use of sound
Thank
to
you.
create a sense of claustrophobia. There are so many nights, when you are, I mean, living on a farm is great. I'll just preface that. It's actually really, really nice. And I genuinely enjoy living
I
in
agree,
the
by
country.
the way.
Yeah, even though we are you've written a thriller, and I've seen people go like, I never want to go on a farm again. No, go on a farm. Farms are really, really nice. They're really beautiful.
Yes.
But there are so many nights where you do feel like you are cut off from the world seemingly, and every gust of wind, every rustle of leaves, every random sound of possums fighting on the roof feels like danger. It kind of reminded me of I'm glad you kind of mentioned some great books. It also reminded me of some the great Australian horror movies of the 70s and the 80s, where that sense of vastness becomes terrifying. You're on your own a little bit. And then there's also those other elements of, when it goes into town and people are saying things and there's words and sentences, and it leads to this increasing anxiety that permeates, which leads the reader to ask, did she actually see that? Did she actually hear that? Or is everything in her head and she's just she's losing her mind? Talk to me about, like, I feel like I'm getting sidetracked here, but like, yeah, talk to me about that subjective experience of creating Jared, of isolation, and using that, particularly with this character Layla.
Well, I think when you talk about, you've mentioned some of those movies from the 70s and how the landscape can suddenly feel so vast, and in that vastness you feel small and isolated. And I think the key there is that you also feel incredibly vulnerable. I think that's where I'm so fascinated by the Australian version of what a Gothic novel is, and it's certainly why I wanted to bring those elements into The Farm, is that we live in a country that has a pretty brutal landscape and a very brutal and unjust history. And so when you leave the city where you have so many comforts and conveniences, and if you've grown up on a farm or you've tree changed like myself to acreage, suddenly it's very much about, it's just you and your skills and this land and the relationship between the two of you, and how are you going to survive? And I don't mean to sound melodramatic when I say that, but when you bring it down right to brass tacks, that's sort of really what it is. And so I love that about the Australian landscape, that it can be so bountiful, but it can really be so stark and unforgiving and dangerous. And so I wanted to bring that feeling into the book. And Layla, being someone who's always grown up in a suburb or in a city, that's a huge culture shock for her and a massive adjustment. Now, you can either see that in one of two ways. If you're in a good place in your life, you'll see that as an exciting adventure like I did and love it. But if you're in a situation like Layla is, where she's got, mental health issues and she's suffering from grief and depression, and she doesn't entirely trust anybody anyway, and she's decided to move with her partner, who's a relatively new partner, out to this new place where all of these new emotions and new experiences will be hitting her. That lends to a sense of foreboding when you're not in a good way. So I really enjoyed doing that. When you're left alone a lot and you're in a vulnerable situation, and as you had mentioned, there's so many different noises out on a farm, and I find that noise in particular is such an effective way to create fear. And I mean, even when I moved into our home here, I was home for a little bit and my husband was at work, and there was this dragging sound in the ceiling. And it happened days and days in a row. It wasn't mice, it wasn't possums. I knew what they sounded like. And I started recording it. And when he came home, I said, listen to this. I feel like I'm going crazy. Because when you're alone and you're hearing things and no one else is there to hear it, it's like the proverbial tree in the forest. You instinctively doubt your own experience. And so in that way, with Layla, it was quite interesting to be able to play with noise and play with sound and have her question herself. We hear a lot about unreliable narrators in women's fiction. There's been a bit of a trope since Gone Girl, I think, around that. And Layla, without doubt, makes you feel that she's an unreliable narrator. And there's certainly elements to her personality that I've included in there to show that. However, you can also read The Farm a second time and treat her as a completely reliable narrator and see how it makes you feel. So that was, yeah, it was all part of bringing together this immersion for her that, unfortunately, in the state that she's in, she doesn't trust herself. And so the reader doesn't trust her either.
This is a great segue on to talking about one of the lenses that we have with Layla, and that is that this book touches on themes of grief and depression and dealing with trauma in multiple ways. Like you kind of say, Layla, at the top, 37-year-old, she's suffered a miscarriage. She also has a lot of family experiences that have colored her life. The elements are quite important when it comes to the story of her mother. And I kind of do want to emphasize a bit of a content warning for any readers in there, because it does delve into subjects of domestic violence, which is quite intense. But I mean, Layla, she is pulling up the scene where she's pulling up a list of baby names and then having to delete them is one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever read on the page this year. It was so sad. But I think what was particularly interesting in this regard is I think examining grief and depression is something that I think is very human. It's something that a lot of books do, but you putting it in this lens really shows how encompassing it can be and how overwhelming it can be, and how there was a great comparison of it, of depression being or grief being like sand. It gets into all your creases and your crevices, but when you're initially hit with it and you're dealing with it, it feels like you're drowning in it in some ways, and it colors everything.
Yes, I think it does too. And I've lost a lot of people throughout my life. My dad was one of 8, and he was older when he had us, and he was the youngest. So we had a lot of aunts and uncles, grandparents pass away my whole, growing up life. And since then, I've lost my dad and I've lost friends, and it's grief. And I've had my own miscarriages, and I've grieved my own lack of being able to have a family, of course, as well. Every experience of grief is different because it's a different loss with every different person. The way that you're raised or encouraged to talk about your feelings or not will impact how you experience grief. It's a theme and a thing that I'm so interested in, which you can probably tell from reading The Farm. And I'm interested in it for future books as well, because I think we don't always have the language or the rituals that we need for managing grief. As you say, it can hit you completely and flatten you. But also, I think we tend to have a vibe of pushing it away and I'm fine, I'll be okay. I can handle this. In Australia, we're not overly religious, which is great. And it's great if you are, and it's great if you're not, and that's all fine. But I think one thing that religion does do well is their rituals for end of life. And I just think we need more secular rituals for this, because it's very difficult to contextualize what a loss will mean to you without tools and support. Grief is something that I think never leaves you. I think end of life is something, and losing people should be demystified a little bit more, so that we're not so flattened and cut off at the knees. But at the end of the day, when you're losing someone or people that you love, or you're grieving the loss of a possibility of a family or something you had planned, it can be very overwhelming and very, very, very sad.
Talk to me a little bit about Layla, because in this story, she's someone who is deep in this well. She's had this, these feelings of, like, she's had this miscarriage. She has a lot of feelings about her body, which we'll get to, in a little bit. She's recovering from surgery. She's recovering from trauma. Talk to me about Layla, because I mean, she's put through the ringer in this story. She really is. But that enables you as the reader to really latch on to her as a character, because she's someone who just, you're rooting for her just naturally off the back of that.
Absolutely. I think if we had met Layla 5 or 10 years before the novel starts, you'd be so impressed by Layla. She's pulled herself up by her bootstraps. She's got a great career. She's fantastic at her job. She's, by all external measures, she's doing extraordinarily well. And I think when we meet her, she's 37, starting to think about what the rest of her life should potentially be or look like. And someone has accepted her for the first time in her life unreservedly. And we find out, I suppose, as you mentioned, with her experience growing up and the home life, domestic violence that she's been put through. I don't think she ever really expected that to happen, but she craved it very deeply. So she has a partner who adores her, and she buys into this beautiful idea of creating the family that she didn't have growing up, which is a really powerful human impulse for a lot of people. People that I know, certainly myself to a lesser degree, but I certainly understand it. And so when we meet her, she's on the cusp of achieving this emotional and deeply held kind of dream of hers. And it makes her really nervous. And of course, unfortunately, as is common and happens to so many women and is heartbreaking for so many women, she has a miscarriage. Now, for lots of people, that is absolutely devastating. For me, it was too. And personally, I was so angry and upset with my body for 6 months. I had found it very difficult to talk about. I wrote a whole book about it, essentially. Fertility is a really personal thing that I think women, we see it as our fundamental ability, and when you can't deliver it, there's a sense of failure. But it takes it a step further with Layla in that she thinks, I never deserved this, and it triggers all of these memories of growing up with her mother. And so she's not only dealing with some really difficult physical changes, the surgery, her fertility, but she's now being forced to perhaps confront and look at experiences growing up which she has not looked at emotionally ever, and it's triggered this wave for her. And then when she goes out to the farm to ostensibly recover, she just can't escape her own life experience. Part of what I wanted to do for Layla, and I think why we all root for her, is that I want her to fight for herself. I want her to confront those things so that she can let them go. She deserves a happy life. And I suppose within the narrative of the book, that makes for a fantastic thriller, because perhaps it's not until she's in physical danger that she'll also emotionally fight for herself as well. But as we see, that's not always so simple. So, yeah, I love Layla, and I can't believe what I've put her through sometimes because she feel terribly guilty.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right, and I do like the contrast there. I mean, I feel like we have talked about that there is a lot of intense subject matter in this book, but there is also lots of key. You need to contrast that with light and things of joy. When we first meet James, like kind of as you allude to, he's trying to find out a way to help her to get through this. He's trying to use the farm as a means to help her. And I mean, like, naturally in my head, of course, I think, of course you do that. You would do anything to try and help your partner in any way, shape or form go through this. Of course, but the problem is with James as well, as you kind of allude to, he's not there. He's for a lot of the story. And again, it's not his story. It's about Layla. And that, for a lot of the story, his absence also kind of leaves a bit of a mark. And then there's also the element of his family, Patricia, his mother, who kind of arrives to, and I cannot stress enough, help out. Help out Layla. Talk to me about James and his family, because I mean they're also kind of a part of the lens of this physical farm. They're kind of the human manifestation of that as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. They're a founding family of the area in the novel, not in real life. And so they take their position for succession and survival very seriously. And as we find out relatively early in the book, they've got a religious background, and James has been brought up in a religious tradition with them. And I don't actually ever really say what it is because it's not really the point. I guess the point is they have a belief system that's entrenched within their family and has been for generations. And that's not a secret to Layla, although she doesn't really know how that manifests in the way the family dynamic operates, which we find out as we go through the book. James is trying to get Layla through this period, I think, and James is a psychologist. He's extremely well versed in emotional and mental health issues. And the other side of that is that I think he believes he can fix anything. And
Yes, this is another thing. It was very like blokey. If I just get in there and get involved, I can solve it.
Yes.
Which I know that feeling, unfortunately, way, way, way too well. And sometimes you've got to learn. It's one of the things learning as a partner. You're like, sometimes that's not the way to sort this out at all.
No, and sometimes it's because it's just not that simple for the person experiencing it, and you want to take their pain away, so you want to solve it. And I think him having this career as a psychologist too, he's like, well, this is even in my wheelhouse. I can fix this. And one of the I guess great things is that he thinks, well, I'll take her to a place that he loves and he thinks is amazing and beautiful, and he will help her, and there'll be no distractions. It will just be him helping her. But the reality is that he also has some underlying motivations for bringing her there, which we find out a little bit later. And it's more complex than I think he even imagined. And perhaps who he thought she was is not entirely who she is, and vice versa. And so they're grappling with this almost unlocking of each other as well. It's more complex for them on both sides. And, Patricia, James's mother, it's such a tricky character because you need antagonists in a way, and she is certainly that. But at the same time, she's been raised in a particular way. I think, the amount of times my own mother-in-law or my own mother has said to me, oh, it was a different time when we were growing up. We had to get married and have children. We weren't encouraged to have a career like you. Like, my mum didn't finish high school, and my mother-in-law had a fantastic career as a childhood, as a primary school teacher, and she's incredibly bright. So is my mum, but they were encouraged, no, the goal is the marriage and the children. And so with Patricia, you can't then be upset with her for having that point of view, or you can't be surprised that that is her driving reason, which is family and the succession of a family that's incredibly important to her. And all of these things are in such conflict with Layla because she's like, I had a dreadful family growing up and I don't know what I'm doing or if I want this anymore. So it's it's just rife for conflict, these two experiences of family coming into clash with each other.
It is, and it also, it adds to the challenges and dimensions, and it means that when you are a reader, you hang on to those moments of genuine love and unconditional love that you get, which is why I really need to shout out Rusty.
Yes.
You need Rusty, the failed farm dog. I had when I was chatting with Dani, his dog appeared in the podcast. My dog's appeared several times in this podcast. Unfortunately, she's not here, but he talked a lot about the unconditional love that dogs bring. It's without strings. It's without guile. If there was any in such a a difficult book to traverse through, Rusty really becomes something that you latch onto, even if you're not a dog person, because just protect Rusty, lock Rusty, put Rusty in cotton wool, for the love of God. I just need to shout out Rusty.
He's a beautiful dog, and look, I will be completely honest here. I based him entirely on my husband and my dog Buddy, who we shared. My husband had him for 13 years. I met my husband 3 years in, so I was with Buddy for 10 years. He actually, I grieve every day for him. He passed away at the end of May. He did make it, obviously, to a respectable 13 years. But I just, number one, I think, as we've talked about, Layla needed someone to support her. And my experience with our dog Buddy is that, as you say, whether you're a dog person or not, dogs love you unconditionally. It's probably, other than I suppose having a really healthy parent, is the only unconditional love that you'll probably experience in a lot of ways. And I think it was transformative for Layla, who had never experienced that and had never really been around those types of pets, to have Rusty arrive, and he just looks at her and he can tell that she needs him. And so they become this pair together. And he protects her and looks after her. He's loyal to her. And he just can read her and what she needs. And truly, that was what my dog Buddy was like. You know, I'd had miscarriage. He was by my bed every day. I had some, unexpected, quite dire health issues not long after that. And I was in hospital for a few weeks. And they let me go home on day trip just to see Buddy because I was desperate without him. And when I was recovering at home, he was with me all the time. We walked together all the time, like Layla and Rusty did. It's just, a dog is one of the most beautiful relationships you can have in your life. I encourage everyone to rescue a dog. They'll pay you back more than tenfold what you give them, and it's a beautiful thing. And yeah, I'd protect Rusty at all costs. I agree.
Absolutely, and this pivots quite nicely into one of the last big themes of this story. We've talked about it a little bit, but it's talking about womanhood and bodily autonomy. I love that aspects of the fertility cycle are kind of incorporated into this story. Very nice touch, tap of the head there. But
Thank you.
particularly how women see their own bodies. You touched on it yourself from your own experience after the challenges of suffering a miscarriage. But there was also just so many other elements that really gave me pause. Again, like medical misogyny is a thing that you see at doctors' appointments. When Layla's boss permits her to work from home while she miscarries, I'm just like, fuck me. But this is something that is so such a critical part of this story. There's also, of course, there's a race element as well, which comes into this story, given Layla's background. But it's this idea that women's bodies are not their own is something that they have to work through every single day, and you can tell that this is something that Layla is she's grappling with it so hard, because she's also got comparisons with her own parents growing up, her own mother. Talk to me about that, because I think it's uncomfortable, but it's the crux of this story. It's what this, I think, is one of the key things of what this story is about, and I think it's what makes it critical reading in my head.
Thank you. I agree with you. It is really uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. And it is something that women live with every day. We're uncomfortable in our bodies. We're uncomfortable with the way that they're perceived, the way that they can be treated as commodities. It's a difficult conversation to have too. I'll say at the outset just that these are my own opinions, and I don't speak for all women. I don't, there's a full spectrum of how women perceive themselves politically, in business, and personally. And I just want to state that at the outset, because I do have strong opinions, and I'm not saying that they're everyone's opinions. However, I know enough women and have enough beautiful women in my life that I know I'm also not an outlier. And you mentioned the menstrual cycles in the book, and I think all of this is very tightly connected, in that when you're a kid and before these menstrual hormones kick in, before the fertility question even kicks in, you're running around with the boys. You don't think about your body. You're just a kid doing whatever you're doing. And when you start having a period, everything changes. Your emotions change, your body changes, and it's extremely difficult to confront that. I mean, some girls are experiencing that at 10 and 11, others at 13 and 14, but you're meant to still be unchangeable and small and thin and perfect, but you're experiencing these upheavals in your own body, which medically have not been studied enough, and these are hormonal upheavals that, my goodness, they're the stuff of life because they're preparing you to give birth. And then after that, your body will go through perimenopause and menopause. And it's extremely, I feel, aligned to the natural world of seasons and the way that we go through different seasons. And that's something that doesn't happen with men. That's not a bad thing. It's just a way that biological men and biological women are different. And it's very difficult to feel judged in your body when you're going through a lot of these changes. It's very difficult to look around in mainstream media and think I don't fit into any of these things that are held up as the best or the ideal or the perfect woman. I don't look like that. I don't feel like that. I'm not doing any of that. I can't wear a bikini with a perfectly flat stomach. I've got stretch marks. I can't bounce back postpartum, all of these pressures. And on top of that, now we have the incredible opportunities that we have with our careers, but it certainly then intersects with then all these pressures of, oh, well, now you're a career woman, aren't you going to have a baby? And if you don't, well, you left it too late. There's always an element of blame. And I think we can internalize that blame to ourselves and then onto our bodies and feel like absolute failures. And it is really difficult. It makes me angry, which is why I wanted to write about it. And then on top of that, we're not even allowed the final word about our own bodies. We might go and see a doctor who thinks we're being hysterical or will dismiss our symptoms because, oh, well, that could just be period pain. In fact, I remember once, and this isn't even a particularly bad story, but it's just a little thing, is that I had a terrible norovirus and I went to hospital because it was so bad. And they said to me, is your period coming? Do you think it's period cramps? These two male doctors in hospital. I said, I've been having my period a long time. It's not that. Oh, okay. Just ridiculous stuff. And as I was writing, and you'll see in the acknowledgements note, and that I was writing while Trump's first, God, what do we even call it, season as president of America was happening, and they were dismantling. I know, we won't.
Whatever it is,
We won't.
arduous march.
That's yes, his pre-dictatorship run at the presidency. But I won't go too much into Trump because it's exhausting. However, I'm writing this book, and I'm thinking to myself, gosh, am I out of touch here? I've been so angry growing up with these things as a millennial in the 90s, but is this even relevant anymore? And then I finished the first draft at, I think, about 7:30 in the morning one morning, and logged on to the news, and they had finally dismantled Roe versus Wade. And I thought, oh my God, okay, no, I'm not crazy, because that's the other thing. We think we're crazy. Men still are having too much say over our bodies. This is not okay. And so that was just enraging and upsetting, and it still is. And there's other, obviously, rights they're taking away from LGBTQIA+, which I also deeply disagree with. It's not just women that are affected by these things. But it is a huge theme in the book. And I suppose I just really want women to know that you don't have to be anything you don't want to be. And we all understand those pressures, but God, just please live your life for you, whatever that looks like. And so a lot of, I think, there's a quote from one of the early readers of the book that said it's shot through with feminist fury. And I was like, oh, thanks.
We need more books like that. We do. It's true, because it helps you educate, and it also gives you the opportunity, if you are someone who is not in those shoes, to understand, which I think is sorely needed in this day and age.
Thanks.
Out of curiosity, I always like to, when I finish talking about a book, it's a stereotype and a cliche, but people always say, what do you want the audience to get out of it? And my response naturally is, well, go read the book and find out for yourself. So instead I ask the question, what did the farm teach you, the actual process of making this, whether it be learning more about these themes, about womanhood and bodily autonomy, whether it be about craft, whether it be personal? What did creating this teach you?
What a beautiful question, Nick, honestly. Um, from the most base level, resilience, because if you sit down, and you know this, Nick, if you sit down to write a book, you're going to confront things within yourself that maybe you did not know were there. You're also going to confront within yourself that you're going to produce parts of it or even full drafts of it that don't live up in any way, shape, or form to the perfect vision you had in your head. And so it's a matter of then pursuing and persevering and retooling and working on something that you believe is important until you get it into a shape that you're proud of. I think that's just something great for anyone to learn, honestly, is that perseverance. And you're kind of doing it alone too. I mean, it's all up here and you're working on it, on your screen, well, however people like to write. But I think it's just perseverance. But in terms of the themes and the emotion in the book, when I first thought of writing The Farm, it's because I had moved out to O'Connell. We were living in my husband's parents. They had a little tiny cottage on their property, and we thought we'll just, jump in there for a few months and see if we like it. And I thought, I remember when I came out, I was like, this is so beautiful. I've never lived among the mountains or the countryside or a rural area. It's amazing. It's stunning, but also it's very isolated. And why don't they have locks on any of these doors? Like, anyone could come here in the middle of the night and come into this cottage. And, so there was this real sort of sense of, I don't know if I feel totally safe here. And I thought, I'll write a ghost story. How much fun will that be? And then, I had my own miscarriage. And then not long after that, I had a really unexpected health crisis, like a life-threatening health crisis. And I'm good now. But as I'd mentioned before, I was in hospital for quite a while. It was very scary, and it did end up affecting my fertility. And so our efforts after that to have a baby didn't work. That's a really tough place to be in for any woman and for any partner of a woman who, if you're wanting to have a family, it's really tough on both parties. So I was sort of in a situation where I had fundamentally changed, and I didn't quite know how to handle that, and my mental health wasn't good. And so I revisited this book and thought, well, I'm going to write another book because writing is such a therapeutic thing for me. And I have to somehow work through the things that have happened to me. So writing this book helped me make sense of my experiences that I'd been through. It helped me make sense of where I was at, where I was going, what kind of woman I was going to be and life I was going to have. It's a really personal book in that sense. And now I think I said to someone who asked me a similar question, it's now up and outside of me, and I can read it and feel so much empathy for the characters in it, but I don't feel that pain or sadness anymore. So I'm very lucky in that regard.
Yeah, and I'm glad that it's here. I'm glad that it exists, and I'm glad that it's a story that we can dissect and put the time and effort and care into reading it that you took into writing it. Out of curiosity, what's next? What comes next?
I do. I have another book. I literally have it on my other screen because I have to finish editing it and hand it in on Monday. There's a lot going on, Nick. I mean, and I'm so excited about this one as well because, as you know, I've always got some sort of theme that I'm interrogating and relationship that I'm trying to, work out within myself as I push these characters through difficult periods. But it's set about 10 years in the future. And Australia has been through some absolutely horrific bushfires across the nation, to the point where there was a lockdown for people because they couldn't handle the resources and people moving around in this really horrific heat wave and bushfires. And so these 4 friends have all had different experiences through lockdown, and we open on them when lockdown finishes, and they decide to get together and go for a road trip together down to the south coast and stay in some pretty isolated cabins in a forest on the south coast. And of course, there's a lot of conflict, and people have changed radically during lockdown. People have been affected deeply in different ways. And that all comes into conflict with each other. And then, of course, there's the external threat of the environment and the fires. So, yeah, I'm really excited to bring it out. And I think if you've enjoyed The Farm, you'll enjoy this one. There's a lot of that isolation, that dread and tension and landscape. And then, talking about, I think, things we've all been through. We all have changed so radically after the pandemics. I see it in people all the time. You see it at a micro level, and you see it across towns and cities. And I found that fascinating, how people have been so deeply affected. And I wanted to, I guess, explore that a little bit, but through another thriller.
Oh, this might be the wrong word to use, but that sounds delicious to dive into. It sounds loaded. That's the word. It sounds loaded. I'm excited. I'd love to. Yeah, can't wait. Oh, yes, please.
Thank you.
We'll finish off this podcast. You're very welcome. No, it's I always love. Yeah, it's so good to hear it. To hear about great when you hear an idea and you know that it's good. That just. Yeah, I love this. That's a book that I want to read.
Oh, thank you. He's hoping I can
explain it. We'll finish off by talking about, we do like a rapid fire question part of the date now, where I basically fling a bunch of questions at you and you give me the first answer that comes to your head. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Prepare yourself. No, okay. It's not that scary. So the first question is, what is your favorite book that you've read in the last 12 months?
I do know this answer, and I've got it here because
I got it there. Yes.
Yeah, I keep them all my favorite books. I surround myself with them on my desk when I'm writing. But anyway, so it's Feast by Emily O'Grady. I think this now, don't quote me. I think it came out 2024, but I read it last year. If you can't find it on the shelf, order it from your local bookshop, please. Emily O'Grady's fantastic. It's kind of gothic itself. It's set in a crumbling Scottish mansion. It's contemporary. A lot of similar themes around motherhood and the way we treat women and their bodies. I loved it. So that one.
Great answer. I must admit, I've actually never heard of that one, so I will have to add that now to my TBR pile that's taller than me. What is your favorite debut novel that you've ever read? So we're talking ever in your life.
That's so cruel. How can I pick
evil
just
question.
one? It's an evil.
I mean, you can pick more. I mean, I'm not. I mean, because of the nature of the cruel question, you can have more if you want. If you have more.
Oh gosh, my favorite debut. All right, I'm going to say this actually, and I think it's a debut. It's The Water Cure by Sophie McIntosh. She's a British writer, and I'm fairly certain that was her first book. So don't at me if I'm wrong. I'm doing this on the fly, but it's it's an incredible book about women and their bodies, but it's set in an unknown time, and there's a family that are on an island, and then a couple of men wash up, and we don't know if they're on this island because there's been a virus, or you just don't know. And it just completely discombobulates all the relationships between this father and mother and the three daughters. And I found it so fascinating. I still am not entirely sure what happened in it, but the writing is beautiful. So yeah, I still think about it. I read it probably 10 years ago, so I think that's a good one.
Great answer. Do you have a favorite word?
Okay, I have lots of favorite words. Like, I love really soft words like shimmer or glisten, or I really loved the softness in the word, in the name James, which is why I chose that for him. So I love sort of soft words like that. But if I'm writing, you find that you have all these favorite words you didn't know you had, and suddenly there's hundreds of them throughout your manuscript. And there were two in The Farm that I had to get rid of. And one was huff, because I was having Rusty huff all the time because he's got so much personality. And the other one, which is terrible, and I don't know why, was rigid. Rigid. Everyone's rigid all the time, and rigidity. And my editor said to me, like, you've just also said this 2 pages ago and 3 pages before that. So apparently that's my favorite.
The things that people realize you've got to like craft through to the words you've got to cut out and things like that you didn't even notice you did when putting a book together never ceases to amaze me ever.
Don't even see it. You just don't even see it.
Of course, you know, as we kind of mentioned at the top, you and I both live on farms, and in fact find the farm experience and the tree change experience quite enjoyable. What's a favorite thing about having a tree change from your experience?
Oh, wow. I think honestly it changes your perspective on how we live. I don't mean to sound preachy because I am a bit guilty of that at times, but honestly, but really, like just being around the cows, the sheep, the lambs, they have their own personalities. That being exposed, even in a small way, to how reliant we are on our weather and our natural systems. I never thought about that in the city. I really did. I did intellectually, but when you live it, it is a completely different experience. And I think that's been my favorite thing, is just opening up my mind and experience to these ways of living and understanding of agriculture and different things like that has been just informative and really lovely.
That is a fantastic answer to that question. I love that. To completely pivot, because this is rapid fire, obviously your love of there is a clear love of thrillers that kind of come out in the farm. Do you have a favorite thriller?
Gosh, do you know what? I don't have a favorite. There's so many that I've enjoyed, from gothic tension to actual trashy airport thrillers. I will read them all. I love thrillers. Obviously, I really enjoyed Gone Girl. Obviously, I loved Wuthering Heights. But I'm going to recommend a book. I actually have it here. I keep it with me. And it's not that old. I think it's a couple of years old. If you can't get it in Australia, I apologize. But try and get it anywhere if you're traveling overseas. And it's called Night Watching by Tracy Sierra. She's American. She was a lawyer and wrote this book. This was her debut. Oh my God, my heart was in my mouth the entire time. It kicks off with a woman alone in a snowy house with her children, and she thinks she hears someone break in. And that's all I need to say. And it is wild. It's so good.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Get it.
You get into yeah, we'll find a way. I'll include a link in the description so someone can go and check it out wherever you can.
Yeah.
You get in a lift and your absolute hero is in there. Who is it?
I really want to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That's a great answer.
Don't be mad at me. I know he's probably a terrible person from the Gold's Gym. I know he's not particularly respectful of women, although I feel that he's paid some price for that. He's never getting Maria Shriver back. Shame on him. But I don't know. That guy fascinates me. His dad was, I think had some links to what was going on with the Germans with World War II. He says he's a Republican. He's socially very liberal. He's completely self-made. He's so different. I think, in some ways, because I grew up watching his movies because, as I said, I had two older brothers and I was trying to do everything they were doing. But in some ways, and this is going to sound crazy, he just reminds me of my dad. He's so different. And my dad was very different. We lived in Queensland. My dad had dark skin, very Lebanese features, Lebanese name, looked different, thought differently, spoke differently. And I think Arnold, it was just great to see someone different on the screen when I was little. And I think I must have attached to that. So yeah, I'm getting into a lift with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
It's just, I like it. I like your reasoning. It's like, it's a character study. You just want to know why he is how he is, which is interesting. I like that. That's a great answer.
Oh, I don't know.
No,
not me.
Once you explained the reasoning, it made so much more sense. Final question. Are you happy?
Yes. What a beautiful question. I'm really happy. Thank you. There's things that upset me in the world, especially at the moment. There's devastating things happening in places close to where my heritage is, and in those countries that I do reshare that on Instagram. I won't go into it, but it breaks every sort of part of you and your cognitive dissonance to feel that you can't change things, that your voice, as much as you add it to a cacophony of voices, isn't listened to by your governments and things like that. Those things deeply upset me. I personally am very lucky to live in Australia, to have a beautiful husband who supports me, and to have lovely family. So yeah, I'm happy. And thank you. What a beautiful question.
Anytime. I'm happy because I got to chat to you today, and I get to chat about this beautiful, amazing book called The Farm. It is published by Hachette Australia. At the time of us talking, it's literally just come out in the world. But
Yes.
at the time of you listening to it, it will have been out for a little while. So if you can, get yourself a copy in the description. If you can't get a copy, check it out in your local library. It'll probably be there. You'll find something.
Yeah.
Jessica, it has been so much fun chatting books with you and chatting The Farm with you. Thank you so much for coming on Date with a Debut.
Nick, thank you so much for having me and giving me the time. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Date with a Debut, and for listening to the Words and Nerds channel. You can buy all books mentioned in today's episode down in the description box, and if you enjoyed the show, drop us a review, leave us 5 stars or a thumbs up. It really helps the show out. If you want to hear episodes when they drop, be sure to subscribe to Words and Nerds, or you can subscribe to Date with a Debut on Podbean to hear the latest episodes as they drop. Want to support the show more? You can also subscribe to my Patreon in the description to get early access to episodes, book reviews, recommendations, and a whole lot more. Catch you soon! Date with a Debut is a Words and Nerds and Breathe Art podcast co-production.